It was a regular day at the downtown branch of one of the city's busiest banks. Customers were lining up, staff were attending to routine transactions, and everything seemed completely normal. That is, until Bruce Lee walked in. Calm, confident, and carrying himself with a presence that could make anyone pause. Bruce approached the counter as any ordinary customer would. But what happened next would shock everyone in the room. The teller, without looking up properly, refused him service. A small, almost trivial excuse was given, perhaps a misread form, a minor rule being misapplied, or simply a judgment made on appearance. But for Bruce Lee, it didn't matter if the reason was legitimate or not. What mattered was the principle. And in that moment, the principle was being trampled. Bystanders froze. Some whispered to each other, unsure if they had witnessed what they thought they saw. A sense of tension filled the air, unspoken but palpable. You could feel it in the subtle shifting of feet, the nervous clearing of throats, the quick glances between staff members. Everyone instinctively knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Bruce didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even frown. Instead, he simply stood there, his eyes steady, his posture perfect. Every second stretched longer than the last, and yet it wasn't awkward, it was hypnotic. People in the room felt it, even those far down the line. Something about Bruce's calm, almost electric composure made it impossible to look away. And then he spoke, but not in anger, not in threat. Just a few measured words that immediately captured attention. The kind of words that force people to think twice about their actions, about the way they treat others, about respect itself. "What I just experienced," Bruce said, his voice low but firm, "is not acceptable." A hush fell over the room. Everyone knew this was not going to end like a normal bank visit. Something bigger, something legendary, was about to unfold. Have you ever been unfairly treated in public? Comment yes or nitrogen monoxide and tell us where you were when it happened. After Bruce Lee calmly addressed the teller, the atmosphere in the bank shifted. What had been a routine day suddenly felt like the quiet before a storm. Customers whispered among themselves, trying not to stare too blatantly, but unable to resist. Phones began to appear, pointed subtly at the counter, recording what was happening. Everyone sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding, even if they didn't yet know how far it would go. The teller, flustered by Bruce's composed presence, tried to insist on the rules again. "Sir, you'll need to follow proper procedure," she stammered. But Bruce's eyes didn't leave hers. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't lean forward, he didn't threaten. Yet every word, every movement carried a weight that could make anyone pause. "You can explain the rules all you want," Bruce said calmly, "but respect isn't optional. It's expected." The staff behind the counter exchanged nervous glances. They had never dealt with someone like Bruce Lee before. Normally, they could rely on their authority or the policies to diffuse situations, but this was different. There was no anger to dismiss, no intimidation to scare off. Just calm, absolute control. And that made everyone around him, staff, customers, even security, uneasy. Bystanders, some of whom had started recording, whispered to each other, "Is that Bruce Lee?" "I think it is." "The martial arts legend?" Whispers spread like wildfire, but no one spoke too loudly. The tension was almost tangible, like electricity in the air. Phones clicked, cameras shifted angles, and the whole room seemed to collectively hold its breath. Bruce, noticing the growing attention, remained composed. His demeanor was deliberate. He allowed the teller to speak, nodded politely, but never allowed her words to shake his resolve. Every movement was measured, every glance steady. It was as if the energy in the room was bending to his will, not through force, but through presence. Customers started murmuring among themselves, some in awe, some in disbelief. They were witnessing not just a man standing up for himself, but a master of calm authority taking control of a situation that could have easily escalated into chaos. Bruce's family, if present, watched quietly, trusting his judgment, knowing that this calm power was more dangerous than any aggression. And then, Bruce leaned slightly forward, just enough to command attention without threatening anyone. His voice cut through the whispers, low and measured, yet resonating across the room. Are we here to serve people, or to hide behind rules and fear? The room went silent. Phones paused mid-recording. Staff froze, unsure how to respond. Customers glanced at each other nervously, captivated by the unexpected confrontation. It was the kind of moment that forces everyone present to confront the truth about authority, respect, and courage. If you were watching this live, where would you be from? Comment your city or country below and tell us, would you have stayed calm like Bruce or lost your temper? The tension in the room was mounting. Bruce Lee hadn't moved a muscle aggressively, yet the psychological grip he had on everyone was undeniable. It was no longer a simple bank visit. It was a battle of presence versus power, composure versus fear, and the crowd could feel the scales tipping, but which way? That question hung in the air, and everyone knew the answer would change everything in the next few minutes. The minutes ticked by like hours. Bruce Lee had not raised his voice, yet the tension in the bank was palpable, thick enough to feel in the air. The staff behind the counters fidgeted nervously, their hands trembling slightly as they shuffled papers and glanced at each other for reassurance. Customers who had once been casually waiting in line now whispered anxiously, eyes glued to the scene unfolding in front of them. Every person in that room instinctively knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would not be forgotten. The teller, growing desperate, tried again. "Sir, please step aside. You need to follow the procedure," she said, her voice slightly louder this time, betraying the stress she had been holding back. But Bruce remained perfectly calm. He did not move toward her, did not shout, did not even flinch. His stillness carried power, a presence so commanding it made the room feel smaller, as though the space itself bent to his will. "Procedure is only meaningful when it serves people," Bruce said, his voice low but firm. "When it is used to demean or refuse service unfairly, it loses all value. Respect is not negotiable, it is demanded by humanity itself." Those words landed like a strike without force. Customers held their breath. Staff stiffened in place. The bank suddenly felt like a stage, and Bruce Lee was the lead actor commanding the attention of everyone present. A nervous junior teller whispered to a colleague, I think that's Bruce Lee." "Impossible," the other replied. "It can't be him." But soon, more people started recognizing him. Whispers grew louder. "That's Bruce Lee, the martial arts legend, the man who fought on screens and in hearts worldwide." The staff froze completely now. Their confidence, once rooted in policies and rules, began to crumble. Their attempts to assert authority were meaningless in the presence of someone whose calm intensity radiated power far stronger than any rulebook. Bruce's gaze did not waver from the teller in front of him, yet he did not need to. His quiet authority spoke volumes, louder than any words or threats could. The customers were captivated. Some pulled out phones and began recording, though none dared to step closer. Every second felt suspended in time, every breath measured, every glance a silent witness to something almost mystical. People were holding their own mental and emotional tension, their curiosity and awe intertwining with suspense. It was impossible to look away. Bruce finally leaned forward slightly. Not threateningly, but purposefully, making the teller understand that words alone could no longer carry this confrontation. "You have two choices," he said, his tone calm yet charged with undeniable energy. "Serve people with dignity, or let your lack of respect be your own downfall. A bead of sweat rolled down the teller's temple. The other staff members whispered frantically to each other, trying to figure out what to do. It was clear now this was no ordinary customer. This was a man whose mere presence forced accountability, whose calm could topple indecision, fear, and arrogance simultaneously. If you were in Bruce's shoes, would you stay calm like him, or would you explode? Type calm or fierce in the comments. Bruce didn't shout, didn't push, didn't threaten. He simply stood there, a master of silent power, letting the room understand the magnitude of his presence. The staff were panicked. The customers were mesmerized. And somewhere in that collective energy, an unspoken question hung in the air. Who would break first? As the tension stretched toward a breaking point, every individual in the bank could feel the scales tipping. Bruce Lee had not yet acted aggressively, but the psychological dominance he held over the room was undeniable. The next few minutes would determine not only the outcome for the staff, but also leave every witness questioning what true strength and authority really meant. It was the kind of moment that traps you mentally, emotionally, physically, even you feel it in your gut. You want to look away, but you can't. You know something legendary is about to happen. And everyone in that room, whether they realized it or not, was about to witness the impossible. The whispers began softly, almost hesitant at first. But they spread quickly, like a spark turning into a flame. Someone in the back of the bank leaned over and murmured, "Is that Bruce Lee?" The words traveled through the room, gaining momentum with every repetition. Bruce Lee, the martial arts legend. The man from the movies, the one who fought every impossible fight. The master. The icon. Staff froze mid-action, their hands hovering over papers and keyboards, unsure whether to continue with normal protocol. Customers turned their heads in disbelief, some whispering, some recording with their phones, all straining to catch every detail. The room that had felt tense moments ago now pulsed with awe and disbelief. Bruce Lee remained calm. He didn't need to announce himself. The recognition in the room did it for him. And yet, he didn't use his fame to intimidate. He didn't step forward aggressively or demand respect because of who he was. That wasn't his style. His power lay not in recognition, but in the way he carried himself, in the sheer presence he commanded without raising his voice. The staff behind the counter were starting to panic. Some whispered to each other, their words almost incomprehensible. "What do we do? It's Bruce Lee. He can't be. This can't be happening. Are we going to get fired?" Their confidence had evaporated. Every training, every procedure, every rule they had relied on seemed meaningless in the presence of a man who exuded calm authority. Customers were equally captivated. Phones clicked and recorded, hands shook slightly as the realization hit. They were witnessing a living legend in a real-life confrontation. The air felt electric, charged with suspense, awe, and curiosity. People instinctively leaned forward, holding their breath, watching every move, every subtle gesture. Every eye in the room was fixed on Bruce. Bruce's gaze remained steady on the teller in front of him, but there was no malice, no anger. He didn't need to raise his voice. He simply radiated control, patience, and silent determination. It was as if he were saying without words, "I am here. I will not be disrespected. And you cannot shake me." The room seemed to shrink around him. The staff fidgeted nervously, stumbling over small movements, their energy erratic. The customers whispered quietly to each other, awed and tense. Bruce's presence created a gravitational pull. All attention centered on him. Even those who didn't recognize him could feel that this was no ordinary situation. And then came the pivotal moment. Bruce leaned slightly forward, just enough to command attention without threatening, and his voice, calm yet resonant, cut through the room. Rules are meant to serve people, not the other way around. When respect is denied, it is not the customer who loses, it is those who fail to act with integrity. Every person in the bank felt it, the gravity, the authority, the unshakable calm. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something far stronger, mental and emotional dominance, the kind of presence that forces reflection, awe, and respect simultaneously. If you were in the bank, seeing Bruce Lee stand calmly while everyone panicked, how would you react? Type calm if you'd stay composed, or amazed if you'd be in awe. The teller's hands trembled. Other staff members glanced at each other, seeking guidance, approval, or a solution, and finding none. Every instinct they had relied on in their jobs failed against the simple, silent mastery of Bruce Lee. Customers continued to record, their eyes wide, their whispers barely audible. Each second stretched longer than the last, building suspense, holding the audience in a trap of curiosity and amazement. Every movement Bruce made, every word he spoke, was measured, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. In that room, recognition had shifted the balance. Bruce Lee was no longer just a customer. He was a force of nature. The staff were panicking. The crowd was captivated, and Bruce remained perfectly in control. What happened next would leave everyone in the room and everyone watching this story completely stunned. The bank had transformed into something entirely unrecognizable. What began as a normal, mundane afternoon had escalated into a spectacle of mental and emotional tension. Staff stood frozen, their confidence replaced by panic, their mouths opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. Customers held their breath, phones recording every subtle movement, and whispers floated like electricity in the air. Bruce Lee was no longer just a man. He was the center of a storm that had formed silently, without violence, without shouting, yet more powerful than any confrontation anyone had ever witnessed. The teller, still trying to cling to authority, made another feeble attempt. "Sir, you need to follow the rules. This is bank policy," she stammered, her voice cracking slightly under the weight of her own fear. Bruce didn't flinch. He didn't glare. He didn't even raise his tone. But his calm, unwavering gaze spoke louder than words. Every eye in the room fixed on him, feeling the gravity of his presence. The room seemed to shrink, as though his composure was pulling every ounce of energy toward him, forcing attention, forcing accountability, forcing truth. "Rules are important," Bruce said slowly, deliberately. "But when rules are applied to humiliate, to belittle, or to serve authority instead of people, they lose their meaning. And those who hide behind them, afraid to act with respect and integrity, reveal their weakness, not the strength of those they judge." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Customers whispered, recording devices clicked, and the staff behind the counter flinched visibly. It was as if the very air had changed. Where before they had felt control, now they felt exposed. Trapped and completely powerless against a force they had underestimated. Calm, commanding intelligence. Bruce took a small step forward, subtle but deliberate. He didn't shout. He didn't strike. He didn't even raise his voice. And yet, in that step, the room felt the weight of authority like a physical presence. Staff whispered among themselves in panic. One teller muttered under her breath, I can't do this. He's too strong." Another shook, unable to meet his eyes. Meanwhile, the customers were completely captivated. Phones hovered in midair, hands shaking slightly, capturing what would soon become a legendary moment. Everyone felt the tension pull tight in their chest, the kind of tension that forces you to watch, forces you to feel, forces you to anticipate the impossible. And then Bruce spoke again. His voice was calm, but each word cut through the panic like a blade. "Power without respect is meaningless. Authority without integrity is nothing. You have the choice to do the right thing, or continue to fail yourself and everyone around you. At that instant, the balance of power shifted completely. The staff's futile attempts to assert control collapsed. The room vibrated with the quiet but undeniable force of Bruce Lee's presence. It was no longer a question of who was right or wrong in a bank policy debate. The question now was simple: who had the courage, the intelligence, and the composure to command respect without aggression? If you were witnessing this, could you stand as calmly and firmly as Bruce did? Type calm if you could, or a WED if you'd be mesmerized. Every second dragged out, yet it was electric. The staff were trapped in their own panic. Every hesitant movement only made their fear more visible. Customers watched, mesmerized, silently cheering Bruce on. No one moved except Bruce himself, subtle, deliberate, and unshakable. It was the moment where the story could have gone in countless directions. A single misstep, a word out of place, and tension could have erupted into chaos. But Bruce Lee didn't allow chaos. He didn't need to. His silent dominance, his calm authority, and his unwavering presence were enough to turn the situation completely on its head. By the end of those tense minutes, it was clear. Bruce Lee had achieved what few could. He had taken control, not with aggression or anger, but with the quiet, overwhelming power of presence, integrity, and intelligence. The staff were panicking. Customers were captivated. And everyone in the room, whether they realized it or not, was about to witness the consequences of underestimating a legend. The tension in the bank had reached a point where even the air seemed to vibrate. Every second was heavy with anticipation. Staff members were frozen, their attempts to act confident evaporated under the silent, unshakable authority of Bruce Lee. The customers, ordinary people who had come for routine transactions, watched as a true master turned a mundane situation into a demonstration of calm, power, and moral clarity. Bruce had spoken. His words measured and deliberate, cutting through every excuse, every feeble attempt to assert authority. Respect, he said, is not optional, and failure to uphold it has consequences. At that moment, the shift in the room became undeniable. The staff, once certain that policy and procedure would protect them, realized the power of presence. Bruce Lee's calm, commanding energy had stripped away their authority like a blade through paper. The whispers grew louder. He's not joking. He's really Bruce Lee. Everyone is watching. The whole world could see this video. Suddenly, the bank manager stepped in. His face was pale, eyes wide with disbelief, and he glanced nervously at Bruce. "Sir, what seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice betraying uncertainty. The entire room held its breath. This was the moment where authority could have tried to reassert itself, but it was too late. Bruce Lee's presence had already rewritten the rules of the room. "You are witnessing what happens," Bruce said calmly, "when incompetence, arrogance, and disrespect guide decisions instead of integrity and humanity." His voice was steady, commanding, and filled with moral weight. The manager hesitated, then nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the undeniable truth. The staff behind the counters were trapped in a wave of panic. Their faces betrayed every ounce of fear, embarrassment, and disbelief. The realization hit. They were going to face consequences not because of Bruce Lee's anger, but because he had exposed their lack of respect, their failure to act with integrity, and their inability to handle a situation fairly. Some staff tried to murmur excuses, but Bruce did not need to argue. His calm, unwavering presence made their words meaningless. One by one, the employees were quietly reassigned, suspended, or formally reprimanded. Within 7 minutes, the staff who had initially refused Bruce service found themselves facing the reality of accountability. They were humbled not by force, but by the sheer presence, intelligence, and moral clarity of Bruce Lee. Bystanders recorded every second, their whispers turning to astonished murmurs and soft applause. "I can't believe what we're seeing. That's insane. He didn't even yell, and yet he won." Everyone in the room, whether they realized it or not, had just witnessed a masterclass in authority, calm power, and silent justice. Bruce didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply allowed the moment to stand as it was a lesson in integrity, discipline, and respect. His calm demeanor reminded everyone that true power isn't about aggression, domination, or intimidation. It's about presence, control, and unwavering moral clarity. Have you ever seen someone stay calm and command respect like this? Share your story in the comments below. Type respect if you'd want to handle a situation like Bruce did. As the minutes passed, the crowd slowly regained their composure. Customers returned to their transactions, but the energy of the room had changed forever. The staff, shaken and humbled, had learned a lesson they wouldn't forget. Respect cannot be faked. Authority cannot hide behind rules, and a single calm individual with integrity can change everything. Outside the bank, people were already posting videos online. Social media began to buzz. Within hours, millions would witness the story, the calm, controlled, and devastatingly effective way Bruce Lee had handled what could have been a trivial incident. The consequence was clear. When presence meets principle, injustice cannot survive. And for everyone watching, whether in the bank or on screens across the world, one truth became undeniable. Bruce Lee's power was not in his fists, but in his mind, his calm, and his unwavering commitment to respect and justice.